German soldiers crossed the line, taboo, taboo. Everyone, welcome to another episode of Trek Canon. I'm sorry about that song. Every time I think about the Daleks, that's the song that pops into my head, right? But it's totally inappropriate for this particular channel. So what we're going to be talking about today, people, is a hypothetical situation between the Borg and the Daleks from Doctor Who. Now, first of all, let me put on my glasses because, I can't hear right without my glasses. So check it out, right? A hypothetical situation between the Daleks from Doctor Who and the Borg from Star Trek. Now, purpose of this video is basically to answer a comment, and I hope that the person gets the chance to see this video, and anybody else who likes the thought experiment, because you guys know I am. And as always, I'm going to be using information from canon, all right, both from Doctor Who and Star Trek, to make the determination of why I think this is going to be the case. Now, the influencer who started this particular debate between me and this particular person, right, seems to think that one, the Borg would be able to assimilate a Dalek. All right, so let's talk about that. Now, off the bat, I had disagreed, right? But let's chat. All right, so now, first of all, there's several iterations of the Borg, but we're going to put them all into one big old conglomerate with the same basic skills, deadly abilities, adaptations, all that kind of stuff. And when I say many different versions of them, right, you got the next generation Borg, right, up until Hugh, right? And you have the Borg that's after Hugh. You have the Borg that's displayed in Voyager, right? You got the Borg that's displayed in First Contact. You got the Borg that's displayed in Picard. All right. So I'm gonna put all of those together because they all have the same basic abilities, skill sets, and all that kind of stuff, right? Now, when we talk about the Daleks, a lot of people seem to think that there's only one version of Dalek, that old little squid thing that's hanging out inside the shell. That's not the case, right? In old style Doctor Who, you got instead of the squid things, the Daleks were like these crab things, right? Now, a little bit of history on the Daleks, right? They come from this planet called Skaro. They wasn't something that's indigenous to Skaro or nothing like that. They was created by this dude named Davros, who was one of the last surviving members of this basic, like I would call it a civil war on the planet Skaro, right? Between like the what was it, the House? Anyway, that's unimportant. Anyway, Davros, one of the last survivors of the losing side, said, "Yo, I'm gonna kidnap two scientists, or I'm gonna get to use two of my scientists, or whatever. I'm gonna use my DNA, man. I'm gonna experiment on their bodies, and I'm gonna make basically the perfect life form. This life form is gonna not have compassion, empathy, sympathy, none of that. It's gonna see everything else that's a life form that's not a pure blood Dalek to be inferior and must be exterminated." Anyway, that's very important. A Dalek sees anything that is not a pure blood Dalek to be inferior and must be exterminated, including Daleks who say have DNA that was blended with humans or anything like that, or impure Daleks. They go so far with their ideology that the impure Daleks, if they haven't self-destructed, would allow pure blood Dalek to exterminate them, because they like, yo, man, I'm I'm not really a Dalek. Anyway, what else? Let's see. The Dalek armor is made out of Dalekhronium or something like that, which is basically this alloy, something that's only indigenous and can only be, well, has only been produced and developed and everything on Skaro, but Daleks have been able to do it, and all that different types of things. Now, the Daleks, they do have an energy barrier, but it don't seem to work too well around their helmet part, because their stalk can get hit with paintballs, all that kind of stuff, and it's their weakest part. Now, a lot of people make fun of the plunger, but the plunger is the deadliest thing on the Dalek, and the second deadliest thing on the Dalek, besides the Dalek's intelligence, is that whole little energy weapon blaster. Right. But that plunger could do all kinds of stuff. Interface with electronics and computer systems. Man, hack. It can pick up and crush things. It can erase memories. It can do all kinds of stuff, right? Now, let's see what else. Did I mention the Daleks were highly intelligent? All right. Now, here's the thing. Can the tubules of a Borg penetrate a Dalek shield? Yes, it can, because Borg tubules can penetrate most known energy shielding, or can adapt to it, and most metals or composites or anything like that, or materials, if you want to just put it shortly, no materials, right? The only thing in canon, to my knowledge, that the Borg tubules can't immediately just puncture would be anything from species A472, which includes their technology and ships, because they're basically made of the same thing. Now, that being said, the nanites, what would the nanites do if they were able to actually make it to penetrate Dalek armor? Yes, the nanites would probably be able to start assimilating a Dalek. But see, here's where the things start to get a little trippy. All right, now let's look at things from the fights that both of these species have had. What is the worst species that the Borg has ever faced in Star Trek canon? That's going to be species A472. It was in two-part episode, Scorpion 1 and 2, right? Well, I guess you could call humans the deadliest species that the Borg has ever faced. But y'all know what I mean. Species A472, right? That two-part episode, and the Borg was utterly getting just messed up by species A472, mostly due to the fact that the Borg could not assimilate and therefore could not understand species A472. Now, let's look at the the arch enemy of the Daleks, besides everybody else. But the arch enemy of the Daleks is the Gallifreyans. Now, think of who the Gallifreyans are in Doctor Who canon. If you think about it, Gallifreyans are basically gods of Doctor Who. They're time lords. They have mastery over time, space, and dimension. Okay. Now, these are the people that the Daleks were fighting against in a time war. Okay. That spanned countless eons and all, just forever. All right. Now let's think about what was going on in this time war. You had species that was annihilated, systems and galaxies that ceased to exist, systems and galaxies that came into existence. You had species that were annihilated. You had species that came into being because of the time war and then ceased to exist because of the time war. As a matter of fact, the Gallifreyans and the Daleks fight was just so damaging that it almost destroyed all of reality. Think about that for that. All of reality. Okay, until the Doctor decided, hey man, I'm. Look. Speaking of, it took the Doctor, the best person in all, smartest in all of Doctor Who, right, for him to say, you know what, this isn't working. I'm gonna need to turn myself into a war doctor, and he still got messed up trying to face. Look, all of these things you got to take into consideration when thinking about the Daleks, because the Daleks was not only holding their own against time, masters of time, space, and dimensions, right? Was not only holding their own against them, but had pushed them back to the point of almost utter defeat until the Doctor released the moment, okay, to stop all of that so he could save reality. All right. So think about it also this way. Mentioned that the Borg could penetrate the Dalek energy shield and assimilate the material. But I also said, remember a few things about the Dalek. Those spheres that's on the Dalek, those things come off and blow up. That's a kinetic weapon. Also, underneath those spheres, those holes that remain, some Daleks could shoot missiles out of those. Those are also kinetic weapons. Dalek can also explode. That's kinetic. Now, here's the thing. Let's say, for instance, that a Borg was able, for some reason, able to get close enough to a Dalek to try to assimilate them. You got Daleks that they could time shift, they could time jump, they could phase shift, phase jump. Borg individually can't do that. Hell, one couldn't even do that. All right. They were so bad that individually one jumped all the way to a time locked event where he went crazy doing it, but he time jumped to a time locked event, all right, that not even the Doctor was supposed to be able to go back into. All right. So when when you think about, all right, well, Janeway gave the Borg temporal technology, which is not really true, because when Admiral Janeway was getting assimilated by the Borg, a neurolytic agent was released into the collective, meaning that instead of absorbing Janeway, they were starting to break down mentally. So it wasn't none of that. I had Janeway's technology, because that's also not supported in future Borg, because they didn't have any of that future technology, the transphasic shielding or any of those types of things later on in canon. Think about Picard. All right, they were still suffering from the neurolytic agent. Now, here's another thing. Time travel technology that the Borg utilize, one, isn't on an individual basis, right? Meaning individual drone can't do that. The second thing is that based on the time travel expertise and technology that the Daleks and the Time Lords have, the Borg time travel technology is like, it's worse than probably Captain Jack Sparrow, Jack Harkness. Is it Captain Jack Sparrow? Listen to me, it must be a hat. Anyway, so that's why I think that the Daleks would not be able to be assimilated by the Borg. And it's one final thing that I wanted you guys to remember. Remember, I had said Daleks love everything that's only Dalek. If for some strange reason a Borg was able to get through all of the explosions and missiles and swirling spheres and energy blasts, which they'll be able to adapt to and all that kind of stuff, and was able to start assimilating a Dalek, the Dalek was self-destruct. And even if the Dalek became Borg Dalek, not only would other Daleks immediately kill it, it would kill itself. Yeah, yeah, it sure would. Yeah, it would self-destruct before any of that happened. Why? Because he got to exterminate anything that's not perfect. And Borg nanites is imperfect to the perfect Dalek being. So let me know what you guys think in the comments, if you guys agree with what I said in the video or wanted to continue the debate. I love a great debate. And as always, peace, recycle, and say the worlds. You guys be cool. Mention I seen this episode of Doctor Who, and it's called Daleks Take Manhattan, where they sucked up a human inside the shell with the Dalek and blended his DNA with the Dalek's DNA, meaning that those life support systems inside the Dalek hull can just drastically blend or manipulate DNA however it sees fit, meaning that if the nanites ever made it to the Dalek itself, it'd just be purged or exterminated.